All right, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to talk a little bit today about establishing a resilient security model. And on the call, we've got obviously Enable, but we also have Fortress Security Risk Management. They are experts in the security field, and we are super excited to learn from them today as well. So before we get started, we've got some housekeeping items. Let's talk a little bit. Everyone should be muted throughout the call, but you do have the ability to ask questions. We need you to use the questions box in the right-hand side of GoToWebinar. If you ask the chat, it just really won't work. Well, we need the questions section. That way we can go back and field and answer those. We will have a Q&A section at the end, but don't feel free to ask questions at any time. We'll be ready to field those as we go. In addition, we have our poll at the end, which will allow you to qualify for our prize today. If you didn't know, we will have a prize at the end. We're going to pick 2 winners, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get there. But hang with us, answer the question at the end, super simple, and you'll all qualify for a chance to win, and we'll pull 2 lucky winners and let you know who those are. So let's get started. Today, I'm super excited. We have 2 experts in the field, Dave MacKinnon and Andy Jones. Dave is our Chief Security Officer here at Enable, and he's got years of experience. So Dave, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so thanks, Joe. Yeah, I guess years of experience is relevant. So I was actually thinking about it today when I came into this building because Andy's SOC is here, and I actually started my career 22 years ago in a SOC, so it's somewhat is coming back home. But so I've been in security for 20 years, or over 20 years now. Started as a security analyst, not knowing what I was doing, and I've worked up the ranks, really spending time both at the enterprise level and on the vendor side, both doing security monitoring, doing incident response. Most recently, prior to coming to Enable, I worked for Warner Media, so I was responsible for Warner Brothers, HBO, and Turner, where I ran SOC, IR, threat vulnerability management, forensics, general cybersecurity. I ran a bunch of different programs there, and actually, the program we built there moved into AT&T, so I was responsible for AT&T security operations and incident response, and I've been with Enable for the last year, so really helping to build out the program here, learning a lot more about the MSP and the IT pro space. But yeah, so that's me.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. And we also are extremely lucky to have a very busy person, Andy Jones, CEO of Fortress Security Risk Management. Andy, tell everybody who you are.
Well, you got it started, Joe. Andy Jones. I'm with Fortress Security Risk Management. We're headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio. We like to think of ourselves as a full spectrum cybersecurity provider. So really everything from the edge all the way through the data center, we provide a series of both managed and unmanaged services to help clients protect their environments, whether that's in, to Dave's point earlier, in an IR manner, will help clean up messes that occur. But probably most importantly, we focus more on the prevention and the resilience side of it. How do we help organizations keep themselves from getting into these situations? We focus mostly on the mid-market and enterprise. So we generally do a few hundred users all the way up to tens of thousands of users in multiple countries. We have for those of you familiar with the space, we have a set of services that would probably sound pretty familiar, whether that's the governance risk compliance kind of consulting framework, your traditional penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, obviously the incident response program. And then kind of the core of the business are those managed security services or managed security outcomes, whether that's a managed SIEM service, managed EDR, or a managed XDR service. We do offer a managed cyber hygiene service for endpoints and servers. So that's a little bit about us.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, today we've brought these 2 experts in the field together because when you tackle security, you can't do it alone. And so I know that throughout my career, I've jumped into whether it's any IT project or security projects, that having the ability to talk with, to listen, to to learn from experts before you go in is really important, and can save you a lot of time and stress and kind of avoid some headaches. And so we're going to jump right in and kind of ask the question to both of you. Why do we think security projects have failed? I've led successful and unsuccessful projects. Why do we think they're failing, or why would they fail? And what kind of steps can you take to prevent that as you jump into a security project?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one to get us started, I guess. From my point of view, and this is true really for really any IT project, but very specifically around cybersecurity. Most cybersecurity initiatives, those projects fail, and again, in my opinion, less to do with the technology and more to do with the adoption, the rollout, the communication, and really at the core, when you're changing your security posture, when you're maturing your security program, or when you're starting down this journey as an organization, these are foundational and fundamental behavioral changes that really speak to the core of the way you do business. The largest threat out there from a financial standpoint that we see, again, not our data, this would be more the FBI's data, is the classic business email compromise. There's technology that can be put in place to help prevent business email compromise, help identify business email compromise, help remediate business email compromise. But the core of the problem is an underlying flaw in the business, in that you are using email and informal business processes to process financial transactions. And without that fundamental understanding of the technology in and of itself isn't going to help unless you truly adopt it. When I'm talking with executives of organizations and trying to help them wrap their head around it, it's a bit of a crude analogy, but it's a very accurate one. If you go to my basement right now, I've got a treadmill, I've got an elliptical, I've got this amazing weight machine, and they are awesome at making me in better shape. I don't even have to use them. I just have to own them, apparently. So if you're not willing to put in the time, if you're not willing to make the changes to the diet and your lifestyle, and just directly translate that to your business, you can spend all the money you want on cyber and nothing will change.
Yeah, and to really add to what Andy said, I view security kind of it's a team sport. Not one person is going to drive that change, and the change needs to be from the top down and from the bottom up. Having that CEO buy-in that we want to do real security, and that candidly, that was one of the reasons I actually came to Enable. Was when I sat down with John Pagliuca, who is our CEO, and talked with him about kind of his view on security, and is it a core tenet for what our organization is going to do. If you don't have that type of buy-in, you're typically not going to get the projects through, because everything else is going to be a higher priority. I think the other piece is really effectively scoping the amount of effort it takes to do some of these things. I'll use Andy's analogy. Last year, I decided at home I was going to renovate one of my bathrooms, and I told my wife, I was like, man, 2 weeks, I'll be done. Like, I got this. Well, 3 months later, it still wasn't done, and it's because I didn't really sit down and figure out how much work I had to do. So if you don't have the right buy-in and you don't really sit down and go through and properly plan out what an effective rollout plan is for that, and oftentimes it's explaining the why. The IT teams, they get like, we have to go do the thing, but understanding the why sometimes gets you a lot further along that path. Just my past history, one of the biggest challenges I've run into is security teams, historically, especially larger security teams, like they're coming in like, you have to go do this, and they drop that hammer and go do it. And then the teams ask for help, like, we're not here to help you. We're just here to tell you what to do. And that type of approach to any project for security is always going to fail, because when you piss off the other team, they're going to be like, well, fine, we'll get to your project, but it's going to be, number 999 on our list of 1,000 things. So I really do think some of it's culture, some of it is your approach, and some of it is properly planning how to roll that out within the organization to make it successful. Because if nobody sees the value in it, it's going to fall on its face every time.
It's absolutely. Sorry, Joe. It's absolutely a fundamental. It's a business course in change management more than anything. It's for some of us, we're old enough to remember when cars didn't come with seatbelts, and then there are those that rode around that way. And it took a generation, unfortunately, to kind of change that mindset of they do feel maybe a bit uncomfortable, but it saves lives, and it became part of our DNA. And whether that's through seatbelt laws or what have you, it explained over time, a very long time, and cybersecurity is the same. It's a cultural, it's a change issue more than a change management issue.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So it sounds like technology necessarily doesn't play the largest role when it comes to deploying a successful security model. It's more people, process, business change. So my question in this is, if that's the case, what were those moments in your careers where you had that light bulb clicked, where it turned on, where, oh, if I approach the business this way, or if I go through it this way with them, I'm way more successful? Like, what are those initial approaches where you start to talk to different teams? What were those tactics maybe underneath that really had the biggest impact for you when it came to that change management?
So from my point of view, from my experience, this it goes without saying what I'm about to say, but maybe it wasn't as obvious to me back then. You know, I grew up in the Army, and one of the tenets of leadership back then in the Army is leaders lead by example. Well, I like Dave grew up in technology. I grew up in the IT side of business. I understand the technology better than probably most executives out there, and as a result, I don't feel as much at risk for being a victim of a phishing campaign or what have you. So I was modeling a behavior of passivity, or maybe even a behavior of arrogance. Of they're not going to get me. I'm really good. I know what I'm doing. And a few years ago, I decided to kind of change my approach. And now when we do town halls, or when we communicate, or even once a month, I will try to be one of the people that will submit a ticket to the help desk, or when a phishing email comes in, I'll report it in our Outlook related tool, and we'll talk about that, or we'll have other executives do that. So they're showing by example that they're actively participating in the cyber protection, or the protection of the organization, and helping us become stronger internally. And I think that's just, it's an optics thing to some extent, but people tend to behave or model their behavior around what they see leaders doing. So that was something that I changed a few years ago across all projects.
I think one of the things I kind of grew into now that I'm older is more talking it in terms of risk, because that's typically what executives understand is what is the business risk related to whatever challenge you're trying to address, and then how do we mitigate that risk. So previously, my previous job, I worked at Warner, and I was responsible for monitoring CNN. And I talked to the team every day. I was like, I don't want to be on the giant screen at CNN Center in Atlanta where they're talking about our breach, because that's like, when an event happens, our job is to help mitigate that as quickly as possible. I agree with Andy 100% in that. For the folks who aren't correct, you should never shame them as it comes to security. That is an instant downfall. I think you reward people and recognize them. One of the things we've done in the past is simple, like the phishing reporting, like Andy was talking about, like sending people Swedish fish is kind of a thank you for reporting. Like those high reporters who are getting value out, drop a few fish on their desk, or do something to recognize them. And the more, I don't want to say fun, but the more engaging you make security, the more success you're going to have as you're pushing things through. Like even one of our programs, what we did at Enable, I guess it was back in February, is we pulled all of our engineers off of active development and we put them through security training for a week, which most people cringe at training. They're like, oh God, I gotta go through training. Like, how do I fast forward to the end of this training so I can click the I acknowledge and like move on with my life? But after that, we gave them a vulnerable website. So we were teaching all our developers about like OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. And then I gave them a vulnerable website. It was actually a banking website. And I was like, here, go break into this. Like, learn how to actually use SQL injection, learn how to use cross-site scripting, learn how to. And then we took the teams who actually did the best and we sent them trophies. Like, we recognized them. We had challenge coins made for that event. So folks who participated had a challenge coin coming out of that. So those are things where, you're building that culture to really engage those teams. And then I think the other part is as simple as like beer and pizza. Like, I think I've done more in my career with beer and pizza to get people engaged and understanding what we're doing and how we're doing it. It changes a little bit with COVID, but I do think there is benefit in having and building those relationships internally so that you have an advocate for your program, and they understand what you're doing and they realize that they're a part of that ecosystem to help build it.
Joe, one of the things that we've added over the years as well, speaking of kind of that reward and recognition, obviously our business is purely cybersecurity. We're trying to help other organizations improve their cyber posture. And we think of it and we talk of it like it is. It's this existential threat to their business, to their economy, to their neighborhoods, their communities. The money, I posted a LinkedIn article a couple weeks ago around how much intellectual property theft occurs every year as a result of China's efforts here in the U.S. And it's about $600 billion. And that's real money that could be spent in various ways. One of the comments, anyway, before I get down that road too far, we talk about it as this mission moment. Why are we doing what we do? And we hold out an example of not just an individual's efforts, but here's a client that did not have maybe the tool sets they needed or the practices they needed or the phishing tests they needed or what have you, that has implemented it and it has improved their behavior, improved their defenses this way. Because those are material dollars. $600 billion here just domestically, that provides housing to everyone that's homeless. It provides food to the roughly 20% of Americans that are hungry, and it actually lifts everyone above the poverty line. So just to give you a rough order of magnitude, it's real money.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. So as we look forward, if we can, avoid some of those pitfalls in the beginning, scope things out correctly, engage teams, both the external teams in the business as well as the internal IT team to kind of make it fun, then we're really looking at, what are those things we need to do to increase our security posture, to advance our maturity, if you will. And it's funny, we had talked earlier on about, is it maturity or is it resilience? What do we want? We know that resilience is the name of the game. So what are those things, those technologies or processes that help prevent, help you respond or recover from security threats? I know this is a big one. This is the big beefy question. So go for it.
You want to start this one?
Yeah, so I don't think that there's any one tool, or there's no silver bullet as it comes to increasing your maturity. What you really need to sit down and have a vision for what you want your program to be, and you should have an order for how you want to build those pieces out. And again, like it all goes back to risks. So what are your biggest risks, and how do we tackle those risks, and how do we reduce that risk to build that program out? One of the things I talk about constantly, and John, I've been here for just over a year, and John finally, I've warned it into him too, is I never talk about security incidents for if they happen, it's always when. Like, we will have a security incident. Any business, anybody who's on this webinar will have a security incident at some point. Like, and you do have to prepare for what that will be and how. So, everybody's going to buy all those tools to prevent. Like, what you don't want is shelfware. You want to invest it. You want to make it work. You want to make sure it's configured properly. The biggest piece is, like, when it happens, do you have a plan in place for what you're going to do? So, if we go back, and all of us, at least here in the U.S., but I'm sure this happens externally as well. But when you're in elementary school or schooling in general, how many times a year did we go through fire alarms? And we all knew to get up. We all knew to walk to a certain spot. We all knew to check in with the teacher, and the teacher knew to kind of tell the next administrator up that that everybody in their class, his or her class, was accounted for. Not all organizations go through that type of exercise internally, which I personally love. I think, like, tabletop exercises where you're actually going through the motions. And I think sometimes there's some fear around doing that. Like you're worried about, hey, we're not going to look great. Well, you're not supposed to look great. Like the reason you have a tabletop is to figure out, like, what do you need to do better? How do you improve? Because when you go through an event, everybody forgets common sense. Like that is the reality. So I don't think, there's a single tool. Joe, if there was a single tool that we could say, hey, Joe, if you go deploy this, like, go ahead and do it, I'd be back on the beach and like my feet up, enjoying this, like it'd be a good day. But what you have instead is really a planned program and driving that program across and showing that the iterative success. And I think that iterative success is the important piece. What you can't have is a perfect program on day one. You build out a runway. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So, I mean, Andy, I don't know what your thoughts are, or maybe you have the perfect tool. And if you do, let me know, because like I want to buy it.
Yeah, so the perfect tool doesn't exist, and I will, to your point, I will say a couple thoughts. One, the question is a great question around, just because of it's the wording, it's maturity, and there's this belief that because you have certain things, you're mature. At 23 years old, I could vote, I could drink, I could drive. I wasn't mature. I didn't become mature until about 3 hours ago because I had to get on this webinar. So that process never ends, and you should think of it as a journey and truly a journey. You should not think of it as we will be mature when we are here. That's simply not the case. And there's a few reasons, which kind of points me to point two of that. In my mind, it's like the scientific method. You're going to come up with a hypothesis of how you're going to protect your organization, and the hypothesis is going to be pretty broad-reaching. What information, data, business processes, intellectual property, etc., what is important to our business, which you should remember that it's like a sample. Whatever you sampled at that point in time, your business is a living, breathing organism and will change over time. What's important today is likely going to be important tomorrow, but something may have been added and something may have been subtracted. So you have to test the hypothesis. You have to test the tools and the team that you put around you. You have to continue to evolve that, because I guarantee you, every time you go and test the hypothesis, you're going to get better, and you're going to rewrite your hypothesis on what we need to do. First time someone goes through a tabletop exercise or an IR exercise, and I mean an exercise, not the live fire, if you will, where it's really happening. You're going to figure out very quickly of, well, what if David's out on vacation and he's out of the country and his phone doesn't work? Who's second in command and who can make the decisions? Or, okay, we've had a breach. Who do we have to notify? Oh, well, we talked to our lawyers and outside counsel. Here's everyone that we have to notify. I got bad news for you. Those laws change faster than I change my clothes. So if somebody doesn't keep that list up to date in real time, you're gonna miss a report. It's just gonna happen. So what I would say is, let's stop thinking of it as this destination and think of it as a journey. Start today by taking small tactical steps. There are some basic things that can be done that will radically improve your maturity over time. But maturity, the very nature of it is it's over time. It's not a point. So, but I think we're going to talk a little bit more about those later. So I'll punt that one down the road.
Yeah, here I thought that you might have had that magic tool in your basement next to your treadmill, and it was gonna
if it was next to my treadmill, it would also not get used.
It's funny, as I got two things that come to mind. The first is, it sounds like tabletops are something that every business should consider running, and it sounds like that's another opportunity to make it fun and engaging. It sounds like security business versions of like Dungeons and Dragons, where you can be like, hey, no, you're done, you're gone, or like a role playing. And I'm sure you've both experienced many of these. And are those fun opportunities to kind of bring people together and really test things out, but also have a kind of a good time?
So I'll jump in there because David and I share a passion for tabletops as a tool, a large tool in the arsenal. I usually, one of my favorite quotes, I use it all the time. Eisenhower, former World War II general turned president, he had a quote, and I'll butcher it slightly, but it was something along the lines of, I've always found I've always found the creation of plans to be useless, but the planning process to be indispensable. And it's that way. That plan is only good at the time that it's created, and it gives you an idea of how you will react or behave. The second thing, when you start talking about tabletops, again, coaching, walk into this as it's a learning exercise. It's not, we're not supposed to be perfect. We're not expected to be perfect. We'll never be perfect. Check your ego at the door, which, I work in the industry. We all have an ego, whether we believe it or not. You have to kind of set that aside, because at some point, somewhere, somebody is smarter than us, and I mean the collective us. They're better, they're further ahead, or more often than not, someone inside the organization just made a simple mistake. And that simple mistake is what has created the problem that exists here today. So tabletops are, in my mind, those, whether you call them tabletops, use planning exercises or FTXs, they're indispensable, and you should do them. Some people do them once a year. Some people don't do them at all. And for those people, you should write that down, that you should be doing them more than never. At least once a year. I'm a big fan of at least quarterly. And I would encourage you, whether it's an organization like ourselves or just phone a friend, don't let your internal team necessarily always lead these exercises. Find a friend that can come in and really, if you'll excuse the expression, rub your face in reality, because we all live in a little bit of a cocoon or a bubble of what's possible and how protected we think we are or we aren't.
So it's funny, Andy, I actually use that exact quote for every TTX I do. It's one of my first slides. So great minds think alike. So Joe, I mean, everything I think Andy and I are on the same page as it comes to TTX. I think the other half of the TTX plan is actually testing your DR plan. Like, it's the third bullet on the screen, but the recovery piece is equally as important. I mean, one of the questions I get asked a lot is like, well, how do you decide which application needs to come back first? Or, in the event of you have a ransomware attack, like, I want every machine back online in 2 hours. But the reality is if you don't actually have a plan for what your business continuity and disaster recovery requirements are, and actually make sure that you can execute against them, that's just as important. Like, knowing what you're going to do in the event is important, and then how do you recover from the event? So typically, like, I try to keep those two pieces together when we go through an exercise. But for any organization who's thinking about those types of things, it's not just, hey, what are we going to do during the event? It's how do we get our business back online? Because at the end of the day, when a business can't function, like take Colonial. Like, Colonial was offline for a week. It drove craziness with gas prices, and it wasn't because they couldn't pump gas. It's because they couldn't bill anybody. Like, that was the reason everything stopped. The business couldn't make money, so the business stopped servicing its customers. And I've had this conversation, and you take any business, they have that. I met with an MSP who was supporting a dentist, and the dentist wasn't overly interested in doing proper security. And I said, well, how long can they afford to be offline and not see patients before they lose those patients? If I can't use my X-ray machine, if I can't look at your dental records, if I don't know what appointments I have, at what point does, you can't even call your customers, because if you don't have access to your machine. So what is the most important? How do you recover that? So I think part of it is understanding what that risk is to your organization. Andy's spot on. Like, it's a point in time, and that's like, I do this quarterly. Like, we have a cyber committee at the board level, which I read out our top risks, and it adjusts every quarter. And how do you make sure that you're doing everything you can to prepare for what you know about? And then how do you test it? And I think tabletops are one of the most fun things in the world, but I'm in that seat because I enjoy it. I don't think everybody at the table always looks at it in the same way.
Yeah, David, just jumping on that for those that are on the call, whether you are an executive in your organization or you have the ability to maybe influence those executives, you must include leadership in this equation. Bring the CEO, bring the CFO, bring the VP of sales, bring all of them to the table, because there's so many misconceptions or misperceptions or fundamentally flawed ideas of what actually happens. David, you made a comment that just for everybody on the call, there's a perception that, oh, they encrypted all of our machines. Everything was encrypted in about 38 minutes. If we'll just pay the ransom, we're going to be back online in 38 minutes. It's not even, that's not even a thing. It's days, if not weeks, for the decryption to work. And that's if it works well.
It's usually not the end of it either, right? So, they already have your data. Anyway, we could go on for a long time on that.
But Joe, that's actually a very relevant point. Like there was some stats released a couple weeks ago. They were talking about how many days, how much dwell time, how much time is an actor sitting in an environment before they actually, like, the encryption's the last step. Like, for SMBs, they're in the environment for 51 days. So they have 51 days to poke around and steal that IP, steal whatever they want. And if, I went through this exercise years ago, but my team was like, we can detect ransomware. I was like, that's great. Like, the event's over. We're already screwed. Like, how do you walk that backwards? So like, we sat down internally and we came up with all the different steps. Like, it starts with phishing. It starts with vulnerability exploitation. This is how they would move laterally. These are the tools that we see actors using. It was really sitting down and doing like a threat intelligence analysis of all those things and coming up with, how do we come up with detections for each layer of those controls, so that we can detect them. Maybe if we miss the fish, how do we move to that next level? How do you move through? That is where you get into the really driving the maturity of a program when you're looking at it in that manner, because no control. Again, I know Andy's got it in his basement next to the treadmill, but I don't have it because I don't have a treadmill.
I have one for sale.
So can I check it? Can I check it with Delta?
So one thing that also I've kind of picked up from listening to you two is that maybe as an IT leader, manager, director in an organization, don't skip those meetings where it's the sales team talking for an hour about what's happening, or the marketing team, or those business meetings that you kind of feel like you're on the outside edge and you're not really a part of it. It doesn't affect you too much. That's part of the journey, right? That's part of the business living and breathing. And if you're not sure what the priority is and what is the most important to the business at the time, then that's where things slip right underneath you. So if you did have those people on the call, in the round table, joining in, all of a sudden they might say, well, wait a second, this is super critical to next quarter and it's gone and you just ruined it, right? So I think that there's probably an opportunity to say, hey, it might be a little rough, but join those calls. It's really important to understand where the business is going, so don't skip out on those. Okay, so let's talk a little about shifting from compliance to resilience. So this is really important. I think in fact, let's start by, can one of you explain the difference between shifting from compliance to resilience, and then what are those strategies to help?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that one. So compliance, and I'm gonna have a fairly derogatory view of this. Compliance, in my mind, is the box checking exercise. If you look at any particular framework, whether it's NIST or HITRUST or any of these security frameworks exist out there, and there are many, they prescribe all the things that you should do or should try to do to make your environment more secure and improve its maturity. Some of them you can just check a box. One of the controls is going to say something like you should use complex password policies. It doesn't necessarily prescribe how to do that, what tools to do that with, the level of complexity, the frequencies of change, things of that nature. So a lot of organizations will go through and they'll take the form and they'll go, check, we did that. Check, we did that. Oh, you should use EDR. Check, we installed it. The difference between compliance and resilience is the difference between filling out boxes and manning defenses. And they're very different philosophies. You can be highly resilient and not compliant, and you can be extremely well documented and compliant so that your paperwork is in order, but there's lots of big gaps. So we refer to it in the industry, these controls, you're allowed there. It's how do you compensate for the control? What are you doing for control compensation? And up until recently, one of the most popular frameworks, it was acceptable to simply say, I am compensating for this control because I have a cyber insurance policy. Well, a policy, to David's point earlier, a policy is reactive. There's nothing proactive, truly proactive about a cyber insurance policy, except that you're going to get a little bit of money when your business is on fire. You're not stopping the fire from happening. You're not installing smoke detectors. You're not changing the batteries in it. You're not teaching your family how to leave the house when it is on fire. You don't have the fire number 911 taped to the phone, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have any of those, and you're not doing the drills. You bought a policy that if your house catches on fire, you're going to get a little bit of your money back. In my mind, resilience is where we have to start. And when we make that shift, it becomes easier to become compliant, but more importantly, your business, it shifts your mentality of where to spend money and where to make the investments. A compliant mindset is one that, in order to check every box, we're going to spend 4 times our annual revenues. And all of these are business decisions, which frankly is one of the reasons that I strongly advocate that your executives of your organizations have to participate in this process, because ultimately the executives are the ones that have to manage the true enterprise risk, cyber being a component of that. If they're not educated and informed on what these risks are, and then helping to guide funding and support where appropriate to create a resilient enterprise, we're going to have a really great set of documents that look great in board meetings and satisfy our insurance underwriters. And then when everything burns down, we're all going to wonder, how did this happen? That's really the big difference.
I would also argue, or not argue, but add, cyber insurers are figuring out that compliance is not resilience. Like, so to Andy's point about, you may have a compensating control and say, hey, we have cyber insurance. Well, guess what? If you check the wrong box during the questionnaire phase of your cyber insurance, they're not going to pay out. Like, we're going through our renewal right now, and the number of questions, the amount of depth they are getting into right now for these policies is extreme. I mean, and it gets down to, like, how do you handle device patching? What percentage are patched? What is your policy for 0 days? And they want you to give written details. It's not checkbox anymore. Like, you have to add notes and you have to give that level of detail. And that's where having that I view compliance is not a plan. Resilience is a plan. Like, here's our plan to secure our enterprise. This is our plan to roll out technologies to properly protect against the risks that could impact the business. This is our plan to recover from them. And they get into, like, especially the cyber insurers, they're getting into all of them. I mean, like, whether it be backups, whether it be actually they actually go into tabletops. And I don't know the last time you guys did your renewal, but I know for me this year they went through it. I had to list off the tabletops we did. They want to understand what you're doing from a reporting perspective. How do you have EDR deployed? What do you have for SIM? And what percentage of your business is covered by it? So it's not to say, hey, yeah, I went and bought a SIM and I sent a log or two to it, like, check the box. I have a SIM. This is the data I have going to it. This is how it's being monitored. This is our 24/7 monitoring plan. Yes, we have an incident response. Like, that's resilience. That really truly is the difference if you compare the two.
And so, how do we look at the large scope, right? So back to your bathroom, right, David? So, and Andy, you do this all the time, right? Like, you don't want to just jump into this and say, hey, I'm going to make the whole thing resilient, right? If it's, part of that plan. So what are those strategies to maybe bite things off? Is it all at once? Where do you start? Like, how do you kind of approach that?
Yeah, great question. So the White House, and this is a CISA document, so you can remove politics necessarily from it. But during the first 3-4 weeks of the Ukrainian conflict, the war in Ukraine, the White House issued some CISA guidance on what businesses and organizations in the U.S. could do to better protect themselves from the oncoming Russian cyber attacks. It's written in fairly plain English. It really talks more about resilience than it does anything else. Of how do you back in the Army days, it would be, how do I create a hasty fighting position? I don't need this to last forever. I just need it to break the wave and buy me time to build a better set of defenses. There's 5 or 6 things at a very minimum that I think that an organization should do. Probably the easiest low-hanging fruit for most organizations is multi-factor authentication. I think most everyone's familiar with it, but it's surprising to me the number of organizations, especially their executive teams, that they don't like the idea of having to, use their phone for one more button to authenticate when they use a laptop or when they use a desktop. That extra piece, it's, that's slowing my business down. Multi-factor is one of the easiest, cheapest, most foolproof ways to stop privileged access issues, or to stop people impersonating people inside of your network. So it's a really, really, really good technique. The one that's probably the most embarrassing for organizations, because it's kind of like my base, it's like my gym in my basement. It's there. It's been there for a long time. If I just used it, better things would happen. It's your patching. And David, you mentioned that a second ago. Most organizations, the great thing about software, and I'm going to say good software manufacturers, your really reputable shops, they do a pretty good job of self-assessing and reporting on their own vulnerabilities and then providing a patch. This is the problem, here's the patch. They never say, hey, here's a problem in a giant hole, good luck. It's always, here's the tool to fix the problem. The sad part is that even though those things are available either for your operating systems or your applications or what have you, they're readily available. Most organizations, I think the last statistic I saw is that the average time for enterprises to patch known vulnerabilities was 180 to 200 days. So we have this myth in our mind of 0-day attacks, and that's not to say that 0 days don't happen, but 0 days are like unicorns. They happen, but I've never seen one in all the years that I've actually been doing this. It's always a basic patching issue. And that's, to David's earlier point, that's what allows that lateral movement. If you think of it, and again, not to necessarily bring up politically charged conversation, but if you think about it as kind of a flu vaccine, if nobody's vaccinated and one person gets the flu, we're probably all going to get the flu at some point. If you can just take care of patching, and it's basic cyber hygiene, that's going to go a long way. Other thing that was in the guidance is this idea of implementing some sort of enhanced or more modern endpoint detection and response, an EDR tool, EDR, MDR, XDR, they different flavors. You shouldn't be using legacy antivirus at this point. You really need a more advanced tool. That's one that is not readily available. I mean, there's plenty of tools and technologies out there. Obviously, you guys have your SentinelOne option through Enable. I would encourage organizations to look at that. Immutable backups. David said this a little bit ago around this idea of make sure you're testing your backups, make sure you've implemented backups, and make sure you're backing up what's important, and make sure it's immutable. You need some sort of offline copy that you can 1,000% guarantee is not going to be touched. If I told you the number of times we'll get a phone call, or they'll go to our website, or they'll go to ir911.com and fill out our form to get some help. If I told you the number of times that organizations had a ransomware, had a breach, it spread laterally very quickly in the environment, their IT department or their outsourced IT department made the decision of, hey, okay, we got it under control. We've got good backups. Don't pay that ransomware. Don't even talk to those people. They're terrorists, which is a true story. And they start the backup only to have their backup engines encrypted, and then they lose the capability of recovery entirely. You gotta have that. The last couple, and I think, David, we've already hit a few of these. One of them is a training plan for your associates, training and awareness. You can't fix the problem and change your behavior unless you know it's a problem, right? It's coaching 101. And then the last one is the tabletops. Any kind of training and exercise that the organization can go through and learn how to adapt and recover. I would suggest one final set is establish the relationships before you need them. You're going to need a law firm. You're going to need a crisis communication firm. You're going to need a cyber firm that has forensics capability, recovery capability, etc. You're going to want a relationship with law enforcement, which may sound a little crazy to some people on the phone, but you do not want to be trying to form these relationships and make these phone calls when the problem's occurring. It only heightens anxiety, it delays recovery time, and it creates a much greater likelihood of not being able to get back as healthy as you were. So be proactive in establishing those relationships.
The one thing I would add to that, Andy, it's especially when you're engaging those third parties to prep, they will also typically do like a questionnaire in advance and things like that, so they're not walking blind into your environment, which, having been through God knows how many incidents in my career, learning is really what takes the most time. Like, once you understand the environment, then you figure out kind of what happened. So having some of those retainers in place where they understand your environment, how they would get access, how do you engage them, what's their 24/7, like all those pieces is absolutely critical, because like you don't have all the pressure is on during an incident. Like I use the quote, like, everybody has a plan till you get punched in the face, and that is a cyber incident. The most technical people, myself included, I know what I would do right now, but when the incident actually happens and your mind speeds up to 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you're processing things so quickly, and you have all these different pieces of disparate information, some are correct, some are not, and you're trying to assemble it all in your head, you really do kind of forget the basics. And having that plan in place, having those relationships in place, without them, it's a much more painful road.
When these things, and Joe, not to belabor the point, but when they happen, we have this mindset that this is a normal business day. Oh, bad stuff happened. Sorry about that. Bad stuff happened, and we're gonna work 8 to 5. We might work 8 to 8. That's not how this works. When shareholders, board members, leadership, clients, family members, employees, the pressure is intense. Your own employees are likely posting on social media about what's going on. Your customers and clients are definitely going to be wanting to have a conversation like, where's my product or service? And your vendors are going to want to know where their payments are, and your hours. And it's a perfect crucible, just like it was in the Army. You put people into a tough situation, and then you make it tougher. One of the things that we're not capable of simulating in a tabletop exercise, or at least no one's agreed to do this yet, I want the people to stay up for 72 hours with only coffee and Slim Jims and a pack of smokes. And then I'm going to hit you with the hard facts. And let's see how you respond. We forget how poor our decision making. It's just like driving a car at night. If you're tired driving, that's impaired driving.
You got it. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And what's amazing is, this isn't just Enable or David's experience and Andy's experience, but at enterprise levels, these kind of things where bringing in people for retainers, bringing in a lawyer, bringing in these who's your local FBI agent and who you're going to call, Ghostbusters. But but the point there is these retained services are not just for large mega enterprises. This is very obtainable with companies like Andy, like yourself, to have security experts that kind of understand, that can help you respond, that can be right there. So it's not something that is unachievable. It's a few phone calls, it's a bit of that planning, and very quickly you can kind of have things at the ready. It's the immutable backups is another key one, right? That doesn't have to be a huge problem, right? You're backing up to the cloud first, and then your local backups are there. Hopefully that means your data is going to the cloud unencrypted, untouchable, manipulated. And even if you have those local backups for speed, if those get compromised, you're still okay. But it's got to go cloud first and not just on-prem, right? So to keep things moving, I know we're getting really tight. We still have a survey to run, but can both of you maybe say, what do you think? What is that one thing that you see in the future? What are the things, technologies, or what's that next thing for security that you see on the horizon?
I'll just give you two real quick, and then if there's a question about it, I'll elaborate on it. But I see AI, artificial intelligence, is going to continue to play an ever-increasing role in this space. One, because the threat actors are using it as an attack tool, so we will have to start implementing it more broadly. The shortage, and this, Joe, to your comment there a second ago, the time to establish those relationships, especially with cybersecurity providers, is today, because right now there's about 6 jobs for every 1 person available in the U.S. If you think you're going to pick up the phone and say, hey, my house is on fire, come help me, they're going to go, cool, sorry, we can't get to you. The second one I'll give you, and this is the one that I spend probably most of my waking dreams on, is insider threat. We're going to continue to see, that's been around for a long time. Historically, we've always kind of pointed to it and went, oh, it's the disgruntled IT people or someone in the IT organization. But more and more, we're seeing it change from that to really anyone in the organization that has a management position or a director position or above. They make great targets from a social engineering standpoint. Sometimes they do it by accident. Insider threat can be accidental. Sometimes it's intentional and malicious. And we're seeing as the economy changes and financial pressures change, we're going to see that continue to rise.
So I definitely agree with Andy on that. The one thing I would also say, and it's just kind of the state of the union, is we have historically, as security professionals, built a castle. We put all of our employees inside of this castle, and we put all these great technologies up to protect them when they're in our castle. And in the last 2 years, our castles have, everybody's moved out of the castle and they've moved out into the countryside, and that is here to stay. Like, we see it inside of Enable. I know in partners I've spoken to and their customers, having a distributed workforce who's not coming to that same building every day is the new norm, especially with the labor shortage and everything else. And in order to effectively protect your organization, you need to be building a program that we have to support that, because for the business to continue but you have to figure out, how do you secure that? So how do you make sure that those users, the backup, Andy was talking about it, like, all right, well, guess what? Now they're backing up from home. Does it make sense for them to get on a VPN to then send everything to the office, or do you use a cloud service? Can you trust their home network? Well, EDR is even more important. 2-factor is important. Most of our offices, in my opinion, at this point have turned into Wi-Fi hotspots. Like, I don't care if you're in the office, you're at home, I'm going to treat you the same now. That's how we're set up here. Like, you get no additional privilege for sitting your butt down in an office. But so I really do think that future, that change that people need to think about is, the work from home is here to stay. And I think organizations need to pivot their planning around how do they build their security strategy to support it.
100%.
Got it. All right. So I think it's time to put up our poll real quick. And so we can kind of keep our conversation going while this is happening. We'll give it 2 or 3 minutes here. But just so everyone's aware, today for the webinar, we have 2 giveaways, right? So 2 winners will be drawn. What you need to do is go to the right-hand side and go to webinar, look at the polls section, and go ahead and answer that. And the idea here is we are going to provide those lucky winners with up to $500, including taxes, to buy some tickets on their behalf. So if you've always wanted to go see your favorite music artist, or you wanted to go see Hamilton, or we've done this before in the past where we've seen someone went up to Toronto to watch some IndyCar, right? So we really want to, work on creating fans of you, and we want to make sure that we want to see, who are you a fan of? And if you're the lucky winner, we're going to send you some tickets to whatever show you want. We'll coordinate with you, and hopefully that will be super exciting, and we'd love to see cool pictures when you're done. Okay. So I think we'll give it a minute or two more while that is happening. And I think we also have a question here that's come in about cloud backups. And I will take a second and read through that, and we'll go from there. All right, so the question here is, we use Cove Backup, but wonder how solid is the backup program running on the server? Is our password protected? Is that good enough? What do you suggest to make sure that someone is not able to delete cloud backup? So really, Brian is asking, how do we help build up those immutable backups?
So there's really two pieces here. So part of it, and unfortunately, I don't have an hour to talk about all the things we're doing to secure that, but we have a program in place to monitor our environments. So hands down, I think part of it is making sure that the vendor you're working with is secure as well. Like you can work with anybody and they say they're doing things, but I think it's kind of put up or shut up. So part of it, and whoever asked this question, reach out to me. I'm happy to walk you through what we're doing from a security perspective. In terms of how you secure your backups, your passwords and everything else they were created by you. Those passphrases are something you hold. We don't hold it. We hold the encrypted version of that data, and we will keep that data for whatever you configure your retention for. And then you also have the ability to test test the recovery. We have the recovery console that you can test, and there are some forgive me because I'm not like the service expert as it comes to enable. I'm more focused on our internal security. But we do have the service to be able to test your backup on your behalf so that you can make sure that the system works as expected. So, and then in addition to that, we also have, if you're worried about how to secure your backups, we have the nerds. So the backup nerd, Eric Carlos, he does sessions all the time to talk about how do you test your backups, how do you make sure that you're resilient there. I know he has sessions, a couple sessions a month. So leverage his time too. I mean, that's why those folks are here, is to help you with those things, to ensure that you're prepared and you're resilient with your approach.
Right, and Eric has direct access to product managers that can get down in the nitty gritty of, okay, this is how your data is protected in our side. That makes it immutable from us versus just your own permissions and identity management, right, on your side. So it's a great question. Okay, so do we have any other questions? I know if anybody's willing to keep going, we're right at the top of the hour. But if you have more questions, go ahead. We'll give it a minute or two, and we'll go from there. Looks like all the poll is in, so that's great.
It didn't let me vote, Joe. I was trying. Yeah, it said it was for attendees only. I was like, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's right up the street. I was like, I really want to go there today.
You go there. So we did get another question. So are there any solutions available today to protect from internal data leaks, from photos being taken or cellular devices, those kind of things? Kind of how do we guard against that? I guess it's an insider threat, but it's that insider data leak.
Yeah, so short answer, the category, the industry, the segment of the industry you're talking about is data loss prevention, DLP, and there are hundreds of tools to do it, and it depends on what it is you want it to do and what it is you're trying to protect from. Can you stop someone from using their cell phone, from taking a picture of a screen? That is probably the hardest one, unless you actually control the endpoint itself. So if you're allowing BYOD, you're a little bit limited there in what you can and can't do. We use the SentinelOne agent internally on our devices, so it allows me to, I shouldn't say me, it allows our CISO to protect our information internally from leaving. We have the DLP controls turned on and inside of that, and it allows us to keep data tracked. We can't move things in and out of email or things in and out of Teams. It has to stay inside of the Microsoft ecosystem. But I guess the shorter answer is it'll depend on what you're trying to stop from a DLP standpoint.
Yeah, Andy nailed it. I mean, there's data tagging options. Like if you're an M365 shop, you can tag data with certain things. Then you can use DLP modules. If it's, if you have specific photos and you're worried about copyright and trademark, like that is definitely a market that's very well established.
Yeah, and I think even most people are generally good. They have good intentions, and I think that too, just adding that HR department into the conversation about roundtables, setting a policy, letting everybody know that it's there, and having them agree to it. That way, they know that when they do things like that, hey, there should be that pause for, hey, I shouldn't be doing that. What's the alternative? How do I do that? And let them ask the question, but just giving them the idea that these are the type of examples. People don't always think about it that way.
Joe, I'll build on that just for 30 seconds. In a real world scenario, we had a client probably 4 or 5 years ago now. I'm going to mention specific product brand names, and it's not to disparage them, it's just to point out facts about the technology. They were using Microsoft Surface devices, which are great devices. Anybody that has one, congratulations. The Surface included a 3-year warranty that covered the hardware in totality. Which was great. They were using some encryption software on the device, etc. One of their executives had stored obviously a lot of files locally so they could move around, because executives tend to kind of want to do that. And somewhere along the way, the device fails. Well, the solution is to get the warranty support and the repair work. You literally ship it back to an address in I don't remember if it was Oregon or California, and from there it's immediately freight forwarded to China. And their solution is to send you a replacement. So you get a clean, brand new or refurbished Surface, but all your data is gone. And that's accidental. They didn't know that. The IT department didn't understand that. They didn't know it was leaving the shore. But that's where 80% of these things happen by accident, not by intention.
Right. Great question, Joseph. So we've got one more from Gary, and he asks, what are some of those tips for dealing with upper management, such as CEOs, C-levels, that are a little bit more concerned about looking good rather than finding security issues, right? So maybe that box checking than it is about really finding issues. What are those tips and tricks that you've dealt with?
David, you've probably done as much of that as anybody has. I'll just give you a couple that I've used in the past. For me, it's usually it's an effort to educate. Most executives want to know what the true risk is of their enterprise, and as I said earlier, cyber is a pretty big and a growing component of that overall risk. But most executives truly do want to understand that risk. If you can't communicate it to them, find a champion internally that will listen to them. Maybe it's the CFO, maybe it's chief legal counsel, chief risk officer. Get them educated. And failing that, probably the best one, find one of their friends that has had a data leak or a data loss or a breach. And by friends, I mean one of their peers in the community, another CEO or president. Usually those are the sobering moments, because they will share with them at a peer level what truly happened, how it happened, why it happened, the business impact, and the reputation impact. And that usually will do the trick to create a sobering moment. Now, I will say, and we all operate businesses, we can always outspend our capability or outspend what the organization can support. Cybersecurity is no different than everything, any other option that a business has to manage. It's a risk. Sometimes you can transfer some of that risk with an insurance policy. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you have an insurance policy, you still by law have to install smoke detectors, sprinkler systems, etc. So just that would be my initial advice.
Yeah, so Eddie, I think you nailed it. I think speaking in CEO terms is important. And the other piece of advice I would give, just to add on to what Andy said, is never waste a good emergency. It's not that you call fire every time, but when you do have a security event, leverage that to drive the awareness. I can tell you numerous times in my career where I was championing for a solution we had a cyber event where I'm like, man, if we had this solution, it would have fixed it, and then it builds your business case for you. At the end of the day, any CEO has a company run. The intent is to obviously make the business successful. And if they don't understand the cyber risks that exist in their environment that can make them unsuccessful or further unemployed, it is really it needs to be part of that culture. It's just driving. I don't know many CEOs who do not care about cyber right now because it is so in the news every day when you read about the events. But it is. Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to say one other thing, as you were saying something there, David, it tripped in my mind. As a CEO, as an officer of the company, you have fiduciary responsibilities, whether it's to your board, to your shareholders, or to both. Even in a private company, you have that responsibility to your associates to maintain their jobs, to maintain their livelihood, and to take care of your clients. Those are all part of that responsibility. There's been a pivot in the industry where we're starting to see executives that are not taking that responsibility as seriously as they should be. We're starting to see financial penalties coming as part of lawsuits, where not only will the company be sued for negligence, but the executives that are responsible for managing that risk. And I don't think anyone's at this point suffered any significant jail time, but there have been significant financial penalties leveraged against some of these executives.
Wow, that makes it hit home pretty quickly. I think too, it almost sounds like the roundtables are another great way to try to bring that CEO in and show them if this particular incident happened today, this is how we would react, and this is the outcome, and you put a box of how much you've paid out. Because whether it's to the threat actor, whether it's to insurance, whether it's to fines and penalties, and then to your point, David, what would that same incident look like if we had certain impactful measures, right? Maturity, resilience put in key areas. What would that same incident look like? A mock breach would allow maybe you to show the difference, right? And what that ROI is and what would be reduced, right?
And you can show, it's most organizations don't realize how expensive a breach is until they go through it. But, when you drop an IR resource in for anywhere between $400 and $600 an hour, and by the way, you don't just need one of these people, you need 5 or 6 of them, or however many it is. And by the way, you don't need them for a day, you don't need them for a week. Like I've had incidents that have run 2 months. Put that number in front of a CEO and that'll scare the hell out of them. I've worked breaches that have the hundreds of millions of dollars in total costs. And that is a highly tangible number that people can relate to. It can put a true cyber event can put a company out of business pretty easily.
I'll give you, Joe, just a quick, real world. Everyone can point to this. Obviously, I won't mention names, but about a year and a half ago, just the beginning of 2021, I received a phone call from an insurance broker headquartered in the region, and they had a client that had suffered a cyber incident, and they asked us to get engaged. We engaged immediately. We had people on site, and by on site I mean remote because of the pandemic, but on site, engaged within 45 minutes from the time we received call number 1. By the time we physically got engaged and we're looking at it, the lateral movement and environment, about 93% of their environment was encrypted. So they were processing no orders, they were paying no checks, they didn't even have the ability to look up the phone numbers to call people because we don't know numbers anymore. We just type in names. There are no names because all of that's gone. The environment was a smoking crater. And it was a smoking crater because they hadn't done any of those basic cyber resiliency things that we talked about. Well, the good news is we contained the environment. We contained the spread. We started to be able to recover from it after the fact. We were able to get some of their backups back online. They were completely offline for 3 weeks. So imagine that scenario. And this is not a small organization. It was about 2,500 employees, completely offline for 3 weeks. It took about 3 months once the first system started coming back online. It took about 3 months to get back to the new normal. And I know everybody hates that expression, but you never go back to where you were. You go back. It's like a car. You may hammer the dents out. That car was still in an accident, and it's still, there's some underlying structural things there. You're going to get it back on the road and driving. So I tell you that because about 6 months later, after the environment's cleaned up, after the environment's contained, everybody's working again, they'd almost put it in the rear view mirror and stop thinking about it. And you can imagine the pressure legally, financially that the organization was under during that time. They had an associate in a warehouse bring a laptop that had been on the shelf online that had not been remediated earlier. Well, if you've just went through such a traumatic experience, the minute your new tool set pops up and says the same variant of malware is back in your environment, everyone's heads immediately turned. There was screaming, there was profanity, there was yelling, there were threats of lawsuits, there was, I thought you guys fixed this, stopped this, made us impervious, etc. Here's the fun thing. Instead of 2,500 devices being encrypted and ransomed, it was 2, because they'd stopped the lateral movement in the environment. You're going to be, and David said this early, you're going to be attacked. Some of the attacks are going to get through, some of them are going to be successful. How well you're able to take the body blow after the body blow is your resilience. So the good news is they recovered.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks for everyone on the call for hanging in there. We're about 15 minutes over, but as you can tell, both Dave and Andy are passionate about this topic. I hope you've had a lot of fun. Appreciate you joining. Thanks to Andy for taking time out to share your wisdom. Thanks, David, as well. And hopefully we will hear from you both in the future. And I think we're running an Empower roundtable, correct? Is that what I heard? There's a roundtable where we're running at Enables Empower.
We're talking about it right now. It's part of the reason I'm in their offices today is to start planning that piece out.
The pre-roundtable. Well, look for that. Look for.
It would be terrible in security.
Well, look for that and join us at Empower if you can, and to learn more from Andy and Dave.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.